Hello, everyone. This is Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. Welcome to Today in Bitcoin. Today is March the 15th, and this is our first show of the day. We'll be on later for you West Coast fans, but now our guest on. He's making a return trip to the show. He's in Philadelphia right now, and Windows is updating his computer, so you're only going to hear him. But he is the legendary Jayant Bhandari. Jayant, welcome.
Thanks very much for having me again, Adam.
Well, I just want to jump right into it, and I know people in the chat are very excited for you to be here. We've got some live viewers, but you know, I'm a big Bitcoin fan. Obviously, Bitcoin is not your expertise. We'll get into your expertise in a second. But I wanted to know if you had heard about the Bitcoin ETF being rejected. The Winklevoss brothers tried to have a Bitcoin ETF. And if you had any thoughts about that.
I very briefly read about it, Adam, and one has to understand that governments are going to try absolutely everything to stop people from using the paper fiat currency, which has no inherent value and whose value can disappear overnight because of government edict or if a nation ceases to exist. And these are not unlikely events, except that people today have a lot of confidence in their government, mostly because the virus of nationalism is spreading around the world like wildfire. But many of these fiat currencies will cease to exist within our lifetimes and within few years, in my guess.
Very interesting. Of course, the fiat system is not. We have here in Bitcoin land. There are a lot of people who are not big fans of it, obviously. Now, with this, with Bitcoin again, I'm going to stick on Bitcoin for a little bit here. With this proposed ETF, do you think there should be a Bitcoin exchange, an ETF, or is that just a ridiculous notion?
I think people should be allowed to own and have what they want to own and have. It is none of government's job to dictate to us what we can or cannot, where we can or cannot go. These are the people elected by us. So if we are smart enough to decide on who rules us, how is it that we are not smart enough to decide on what we want to own? I see absolutely no reason why these people should be dictating what we can own.
Yeah, that is very true. The powers that be, they're just too powerful sometimes. I wanted to say that Jayant Bhandari's link is below if you want to check out his blog. I forgot to mention that. And of course, live viewers, please like this video. We have a lot of you right now, and feel free to ask questions. I will check out the chat if you have any questions for Jayant, and I'm sure you do. I'm still sticking with Bitcoin here for a second. Have you heard anything about Bitcoin lately? Is Bitcoin going to be the digital gold of the world?
Well, I don't think, Adam, that it will be the digital gold. Anything can be digital gold, and we can't predict the future. What we can try to do is to protect our wealth as much as we can. And even gold is not going to be money, in my view, in the future. What will happen in the future is unpredictable. The best we can do is to try to take the next step that improves the future of our wealth, and that improves our future.
Excellent. Now, I want to go into India here. People love your stories about India. Right now on your blog, you talk about a space program for India, but at the same time, they have problems bringing toilets to the regular people. So tell us what's up in India.
Adam, 2,000 years back, there were toilets in the Roman Empire. India today does not have toilets for 50% of its population. 0%, half the population of Indians go out in the open to relieve themselves. That is why when you travel in India, wherever you go in India, it smells. Now, in my view, the biggest reason why this happens is not necessarily because of the government, but because people do not have the capabilities to plan into the future. This shows an inherent irrationality and superstitious nature of the population. Now, Adam, this is actually pretty much the case with the whole of the Middle East, the whole of South Asia, whole of Africa, and most of South America. Now, it's very difficult for a Western person to really understand why half the population does not have toilets. You and I don't have to depend on the government to build toilets for us. The problem is that people just simply cannot organize themselves to build toilets. Now, toilets is only a symbol of something much deeper and much bigger problem related with these countries. Half of Indians do not have electricity. Half of Indians don't have proper housing. Actually, much higher proportion of Indians don't have proper housing. Half of Indians don't have access to primary health care. Half of Indian children are stunted. They are malnourished. So the problems are huge. They exist in medieval times, even today.
Yes, yes. Sorry, I had the microphone on mute. It must be just an amazing situation to be on the ground there and just to see what's truly going on. So what India is getting involved in a space program. Is this what I'm led to believe? And also get into the numbers. You know, we hear so much that India is the next big thing, but what's really going on here? Is it, how corrupt is it?
So, Adam, I am almost 50 years old, and I have yet to meet a public servant in that country who is honest. They all ask for a bribe. Now, there has been a lot of talk about India growing at a very fast pace, which is all completely erroneous, actually. Indian GDP per capita today is $1,718 per capita, which translates into $140 per month. Now, Adam, try living on $140 every month in the US. And remember, at least half of Indians earn less than $140 a month. This is an extremely, extremely poor and wretched country. Now, India, similar to a lot of these so-called emerging markets, grew at a very rapid pace over the last 3 decades. And these people, because they are tribal, started to think that it was something inherent about them, something inherent goodness about them that allowed them to develop at such a fast pace, much faster growth rate than Western countries grew at. Now, this is again an erroneous perception, because when India grows at 7.5% growth rate, it grows at only $127 per person per capita. If the United States with $55,000 per capita GDP grows at only 1%, it still grows at $550 per capita GDP. So these growth rate figures lead us to something very erroneous in our mind. Now, this is also important to understand why India was growing at 7.5%. India was growing at such a relatively fast rate compared to its prior past is because of one thing called internet. Internet allowed India to very rapidly transfer technology from the Western countries to India, and the same thing happened with most of the emerging markets. So India became a back office for Americans, Canadians, British. So in my view, Adam, the low-hanging fruit have now been plucked, and India is already starting to stagnate. These people in the meantime have become extremely arrogant. They have become more irrational rather than less irrational. And as I said initially, the real problem of a lot of these non-Western societies is that they are very superstitious, very irrational, and very tribal. And they are going to face a huge amount of problem because their economies have improved. They have Western institutions that don't work in these societies because Western institutions emerged in the West because of a certain culture of Europe. That culture does not exist in these countries. So I see a huge problem in these emerging markets, including in India, of course.
Well, let's talk about some specifics here. On the last interview, you mentioned the cash problems in India, and have you heard anything more about Bitcoin coming from India? Any more interest from the top? I mean, I know some people will never get into Bitcoin. Obviously, there's a level of sophistication. They don't have the internet per se, but you did mention the internet, and of course, the internet brought a lot to India. And it has a chance to bring Bitcoin to India now. So have you heard anything more about Bitcoin in India? Any Ponzi schemes with Bitcoin even? I mean, there's the good and the bad that Bitcoin can bring.
Adam, I get emails from Indians on a daily basis these days asking for my advice on how they can move their money abroad. But remember, 1 billion Indians do not have internet even today. This pretty much means that any interest in moving money abroad or any interest in Bitcoin has to come from a very small part of wealthy Indians. And this, from what I know, is already happening. People are trying to move their money abroad. People are buying Bitcoins. People are buying gold and storing their gold outside the country. The big problem in terms of information is that most of this is hidden from official statistics. So we don't really know what is actually happening, except that I have never received as many emails as I have in the recent past asking for my advice on how to move their money abroad. Of course, I don't really advise anyone, so unfortunately, I can't respond to those emails, but that's a clear trend I have seen in that country.
Well, yeah. So you can't give them advice per se, but in general, would you advise people of India if they can, to pick up some Bitcoin? I mean, to me, at least.
Adam, as I talked with you earlier, India is becoming a police state, and in my view, India will disintegrate into smaller countries within a decade. The situation is changing very rapidly in India. But this is not only just with South Asia, India, it's a problem with the Middle East and Africa. Brazil has the same problem. These countries are unnatural nations and they will disintegrate. The fiat currency that people own in these countries will have no value once the regulatory support goes away from their foundations. It is very important for these countries, particularly with Indians who are very, very inward looking, to internationalize themselves. They should own whatever tool they can, including Bitcoin, which allows them to internationalize themselves in terms of their wealth and in terms of being able to leave the country when the time comes. Because the problem is when these countries disintegrate, it will lead to major problems, and these countries will devolve into tribal societies, and tribal societies always fight among themselves. Unfortunately, that's the humanity future we are looking at. I don't see a solution. You should search for a solution for yourself, if not for the society.
So based on what you said, and based on the fact that you believe in overreaching governments, in fiat currency going down the tubes, would you say to Westerners, maybe you should diversify into Bitcoin so you'll be able to get your wealth out of your country if worse comes to worse?
Absolutely every person in the world should diversify himself internationally and not have his wealth dependent on the regulatory edict of his own government. You're always treated better in a foreign country than in the country that you live and that applies certainly to these non-Western countries. It also applies to the Western countries. Look at Europe. Europe is imploding right now, and I think most of us will probably agree currency called euro will likely not exist in a few years' time. Now, Canada has a huge problem. Canadians have pretty much opened doors for migrants, and this will lead to a huge amount of problems in Canada. And I think US will have its own problem. So it's best that you diversify yourself as much as possible. And I completely agree with you, Adam. This might include looking at the possibility of owning some Bitcoin.
I want to know your opinion on the U.S. dollar. That's the king of the fiat right now. Wherever I travel, it is very well respected. If you have it, it's like it's better than anything. How long do you see this lasting? I think the dollar can last quite some time, but a lot of people in the internet realm of economics disagree with me. What do you think?
I completely agree with you, Adam. US dollar is fiat currency. It is still based on regulatory edict. But also remember that the United States, despite all its flaws, is still probably the best major country in the world. Its people, its society has the concept of private property. It has the concept of reason underpinning this society. This means that the paper issued by this society still carries more value than any other paper fiat currency that I have known. And what is actually happening, Adam, is that as I have said, a lot of these emerging markets, and the only exception I make is East Asia, a lot of these emerging markets are imploding, and because they are imploding, their fiat currency will eventually have no value, and these fiat currencies can lose their value overnight, which means that those among these societies who have their wealth in paper would like to convert their paper into US dollar paper because they think, quite rightly, that this US dollar will continue to have value longer than probably any other paper currency in circulation.
All right, I have a question from the audience, actually, and this is a very interesting question. Do you know what percentage of Indians have mobile phones?
About 50 to 70% of Indians might have mobile phones. Now, this is a very difficult number to know for sure, Adam. And the reason is that so many people use many SIM cards. And the numbers that you get of SIM cards in circulation in the country is more than the population of the country. But most people I know own many SIM cards. So we don't know for sure, but I do know one thing for reasonably well, that only about 13 to 17% Indians own a smartphone.
Okay, that is important to know. Now, I know why people are asking this question, because they want to know how easily Bitcoin could be used over that method within India. So that is a good question. That is a good answer there. Now you're in gold mining. You're in gold. We can talk about that. You go to mining conferences. Has there been any trickle of news about Bitcoin's current issues into your realm? Do you have any idea if there's controversy in Bitcoin? What is the aura that Bitcoin is giving out to your corner of the financial world?
Well, people talk about Bitcoin everywhere, Adam. I was in Auburn yesterday. I was speaking at the Mises Institute Scholars Conference. And the general session in which I gave my speech was about blockchain. Barter to blockchain was the general theme of the conference, the session that I was speaking in. So yes, blockchain is becoming extremely well talked about, and Bitcoin keeps appearing because this is probably the only well-known blockchain-based system accepted around the world.
Have you heard of any other coins on the blockchain? Are there any other ones that you have heard of besides Bitcoin?
Well, I have heard of many Litecoin and some others, Adam, but of course, by far the most well-known one is Bitcoin.
Yes, and I try to make that point to people that there are so many coins out there, and in the little ecosystem that we're in this cryptocurrency world, everyone knows like 10, 20, 30 of these coins. And I try to tell people, like, in the real world, it's like Bitcoin is the blockchain. Bitcoin is cryptocurrency. And then maybe people, and you have heard of Litecoin. A few other people have also heard of Litecoin. So as an investor, or as a person who looks at solid investments, now you might not know about this, but there's a slim chance that Bitcoin has been slowing down. I'm not going to get into all the specifics, but some people may try to split Bitcoin into two so that there end up being two Bitcoin. And I think, would that be confusing to people, or would that hurt investor confidence? Would people still want to be in Bitcoin if suddenly there was a Bitcoin 1 and a Bitcoin 2? What do you think of that type of situation just suddenly happening out of the blue?
I have no clue, Adam. Again, I think the future is always unpredictable, and the best thing for people is to diversify themselves in different kind of currencies, different kind of jurisdictions, different kind of commodities, different kind of investments. In neither of those would I invest a very significant amount of my wealth.
Okay, so now I want to. What's been going on is there any big news that I didn't ask about that you'd like to bring up, a topic? Because you have so many awesome stories and everything.
Well, Adam, let's address two things about India. India sent a rocket last month with 104 satellites, and Indians are feeling very proud. Half of these people don't have toilets to go to, but they are very proud of the achievement of their country. Now, remember, the rocket technology was not invented in India. It was invented in the West. These people copied Western technology and now claim it to be their own. And when India sent 104 rockets with satellites to the space, Indian government completely forgot to mention that most of those satellites were actually very small satellites, probably which you can hold in one palm, a few pounds or less than a pound. They could even have been chip-sized satellites. This is one thing which I find very funny. And also because government of India is subsidizing the launch of these satellites, Indians who are going hungry are subsidizing satellites that India is sending for the Western countries, which is so idiotic in my view. Also, Indian government recently released growth figure of 7% year for the last quarter, annualized for the last quarter. And that's such a strange figure because India is not only not growing, it is stagnating. And in my view, India has suffered a serious economic setback in the last one quarter because of demonetization. And I think it has fundamentally destabilized the country economically. But still, somehow they have managed to release 7% economic growth. And I have tried to dissect that in the latest article that I wrote for Acting Man.
All right, we have a question from the audience here. It's about Bitcoin. Do you think Bitcoin can become a currency or just a value holder like gold?
I think it is extremely difficult, Adam, to predict what the currency of the future will be. Paper currency will and has to cease to exist. What form of currency we will have in the future after this paper currency has ceased to exist cannot be known now. what we can do between now and then is to preserve as much of our wealth as we can, and that is through diversification. It could be through Bitcoin, it could be through gold, and it is very possible, Adam, that your gold might lose value or your Bitcoin might lose value. So you still have to diversify, in my opinion. There is no way you can, however, predict what will be the future currency internationally.
All right. So I want to remind everyone as we get close to the end of the interview here, please like this video right now. Hit that like button, give it a thumbs up. It's always great to have Jayant here. Jayant, give us your schedule. Where are any upcoming events? Any things you want people to know about?
I am in Singapore later this month, and I will be speaking on what is happening with in India these days. And then early next month in April, I will be speaking at Minds and Money show in Hong Kong. And strangely, for the first time, Adam, I will be speaking positively about a politician, and that is Donald Trump.
Wow. Wow. You like Donald Trump. You like what's going on here in the United States.
This is the last chance United States has to correct its the path it has been on for many decades. And Donald Trump is, I think, I don't really have a lot of respect for the individual as such, but the fact is that he is doing things that I could not imagine a politician doing. So I'm very optimistic. I'm very happy with what he's doing. Not everything that he does is something I will agree on, and that is why governments are unnatural entities. But being for government, whatever he's doing, I actually have a lot of respect for what he's doing.
All right, we have one final question, and it's from the audience, actually. I don't know if it's a Bitcoin question. What needs to happen to get faster and widespread adoption in India of Bitcoin in India?
This is not going to happen, Adam. This is a country of 1.35 billion people. My guess is about 50 to 70% of those people cannot write their own names. It's an extremely unskilled, untrained society. So you cannot have much hopes from these poor Indians, except that this might be a major humanitarian crisis building up right now. Having said that, about 100, 200 million Indians are educated enough to use internet, and they are the people who might be in a position to use Bitcoin. And these are the people who at least a fraction of these people are paying attention. But really, Adam, all you need for anything to change its value is the people at the margin. It's always a fraction of the society that takes a leadership position in anything.
All right, I think that's a good way to wrap it up there. Someone needs to step up in India, basically. All right, Jayant, I really thank you for your time today. It was a very interesting video. You always give a very unique perspective and bring us news from India, and the people don't get to hear a lot about India. So I hope it doesn't snow or anything where you are in Philadelphia. I hope you have a good time. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be in front of your audience, Adam.
Well, everyone, that's it for now. We will be back on later, maybe in 10 hours or so. Just look for us here. We'll have a show all about Bitcoin, what's the news of the day and everything. I'm Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. Do like this video, share this video, subscribe to this channel. Tell me what other guests you want to see on. You can email me at adam@tresorhelp.com. I will talk to you guys later. That was Bitcoin today, and we will have Bitcoin tonight later on. Bye for now.